the Presidential Panel on Police Reforms has agreed to the 5-point demand of protesters against police brutality, which included halting use of force against protesters and also the unconditional release of all arrested citizens. Other demands include justice for the victims of police brutality, including payments of compensation, and the psychological evaluation of policemen, including increasing their salaries. Despite these concessions, however, including the dissolution of the controversial police squad SARS, the protests yesterday spread to Port Harcourt in Rivers State, Ibadan in Oyo State, Akure in Ondo State, Owerri in Imo State, Ilorin in Kwara State, Enugu in Enugu State, and Yola in Adamawa State. The protesters also sustained their campaign in Lagos and Abuja, where it's been reported that soldiers yesterday brutalized some of the youth.
All right, we still have our Rise News analyst here with us in the studio, Emmanuel Efeni. But then joining us is a security expert, KABIRU ADAMU, he's in our Abuja branch. Glad to have you join us, KABIRU.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here.
Good, fantastic. From SARS to SWAT. SWAT reminds me of the SWAT team in America. I'm sure, of course, you've watched the films on SWAT. What's in the name?
Frankly, nothing. A name is just a name. It's an acronym, and any group of individuals can be put together, and that acronym, labeled on them. What is more important is what mandate, what organizational structure, what resources, what kind of oversight, what kind of monitoring and evaluation is given to that body. So for this newly created squad in Abuja, that's what we expect to see. What operational mandate have they been issued? What kind of equipment will be given to them? Will they have the same mandate like SARS, where they are able to go out on the street and conduct patrols? Or will they operate like what we know in the movie? Almost everyone in the country, I think, has seen that movie. A lot of us have seen it. And we know they only go out when the conventional police are unable to deal with issues, or when the security challenges have to do with heavy weaponry that the ordinary average policeman cannot deal with. So that's what I expect in the coming days for the police management leadership to make open, let Nigerians know what operational orders have been given to this SWAT team. And more importantly, they are going to be trained. What kind of training manual is going to be developed and that will be used for their training? Will that training manual be for weapon handling only, or will there be elements of my and your civil liberties ingrained in that, just as the newly passed Police Act 2020 has? So a lot of issues around structure, around the management of this new tactical team is what I hope to see in the next few days.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. ADAMU. Let's speak about this a bit further. What, as a security analyst and expert yourself, what do you think the operational mandate should be? If you can give us sort of a brief analysis on that, because the honest truth is, a lot of young Nigerians are scared, absolutely scared. And when they see that SARS has been changed to SWAT, of course, also due to distrust in the government, no one really sees much of a change. And one is trying to understand what to possibly expect. So from that security perspective, tell us a bit more. What sort of operational mandates would be fitting to a unit like this?
First off, we need to recognize that SWAT is a tactical team. It's not the conventional policing mechanisms that you and I know. So, for instance, patrol is a conventional policing measure or mechanism. An average policeman should be, well versed in the elements of patrol and investigation and several other policing methods, including traffic control. But a tactical unit is a special unit that is created to deal with unique challenges, such as armed robbery, for which SARS was created. Now, as part of its mandate, I expect to see that it can only be deployed when it is called upon by perhaps the leadership of the police management to go and deal with a particular issue. So, for instance, let's say there is a robbery case or there is a gang that is known to operate in a part of Abuja or a part of Lagos. Conventional intelligence investigation has revealed the existence of that gang. Now, SWAT can be deployed to go and deal with that gang, and specific for that purpose. So as part of the operational mandate, I hope to see that type of command and control that leads us to understand when they can be deployed, how they can be deployed, what kind of weaponry they should use when they are deployed. And then more importantly, I hope to see that occasionally, say periodically, they can be evaluated, psychological evaluation, that is. And then of course, even their competence, their physical competence, as well as mental competence will be evaluated as part of that. There are several other measures that shouldn't be specific to SWAT, but I would like to mention them here. Pre-employment vetting, who is befitting, who can be a member of that SWAT team. That criteria needs to be made open to the Nigerian public. As an example, someone who has had a history in the past of whatever kind of abuse should never be part of that team. Someone who is not, who doesn't have the composure to assess situations mentally and then respond to it, adequately should not be part of that team. Someone who has had a history of drug abuse or for whatever kind of abuse, alcoholism or whatever, should not be part of that team. Someone who has the tendency to collect bribe should not be part of that team. So as part of that criteria, I hope to see that type of thing. And then the next thing is, after they've been engaged, what kind of vetting exercises, employment vetting, that's after every period, let's say 6 months, they should be subjected to vetting so that we know whether they've deviated from the core objectives of that tactical unit. Because let's remember, a tactical unit is what it is. It's a tactical unit. The strain of working in a tactical unit can expose personnel to different challenges. And so constant evaluation of their mental state as well as physical state is required. No matter how good they are at the beginning, once they're exposed to that, the tendency for them to be traumatized, and not only traumatized, respond to some of these challenges is very, very high. So a lot needs to be done in terms of their evaluation and ensuring they are. So all of these are what I hope to see in the operational order going forward.
All right, KABIRU, we're going to come back to you later on, but we'll have Emmanuel Feni, our in-house analyst, here in the studio. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked him about SWOT. It's called, and he mentioned weapon, incidentally, and he's talking about tactics, which is good. SWOT, Special Weapons and Tactics Team. That is what it is called. He said nothing, but the name has been changed. It used to be Special Anti-Robbery Squad.
Yeah.
What do you make of it? What's your sense of the name as it is now?
Well, what's the name?
And the mandate, of course.
Yes, and I think KABIRU has clearly listed what you expect of a new team. But I think the problem we're having now is rushing first to name change, even before you change personnel and the character of the personnel. And we have a history of name change in the country. NEPA to power holding, nothing changed.
Okay.
Nigerian prisons to Nigerian corrective services, not much has changed, just name change. So when you start with name change, it's like the same old story and sequence. What I expected the police high command to do first is to start the process of getting a new team. I listened to the explanation they gave. SARS, all former SARS officers and men should report to Abuja. They will be debriefed and they will be checked psychologically and mentally before they will be redeployed.
Medically.
Yes. They will recruit, they will move other officers into the SWAT team. They will be trained specially for that, and they will start a new team.
Isn't that the process?
Yes.
They're going to undergo training?
Yes, they will be trained. But to start with name change, I think it does not resonate well with Nigerians who have history, who are used to a history of changing name without changing content and character. So I think that is the first problem they are having. Hence, you hear the youths, yes, we don't want SARS, we don't want SWAT. Because you are just talking about name change. They want to see concrete action.
Are you not taking the name change outside of the fact that they have said because of the lacuna that could be created, so they're giving this name, and they have said even before they start operations, they're going to undergo training in Nasarawa State, somewhere in the Southeast River State, psychological training, all the training that needs to be done before they can be deployed into the field.
You still have policemen in place. The fact that you have disbanded SARS does not mean there's no policing going on. We still have policemen who are trained in various aspects within the police force. They will keep on doing the policing job. But this special team is something you have to take time to train, given the background and the history of SARS, to ensure that your new SWAT at the end of the day will not become another SARS.
Yeah.
So this is what you need to concentrate on first. The SWAT you are talking about, you cannot train them overnight. So why coming first with name change?
Rather than for you to actually say, maybe a couple months down the line, guess what, Nigerians, this is what we have to present to you. We present you with the SWAT that's been through this, that, etc. Mr. Feni, that's a very good point that you made. I want to throw that back over to our Abuja studios to Mr. Adamu. Let's get your thoughts on what Mr. Feni just had to say here in our Lagos studios. And I mean, it is a bit concerning because we've heard this on multiple occasions where we see names being changed, but nothing systemically changes. We also have a standard problem all across the country. So when we're talking about psychological care, when we're talking about the medical care and training, how much can we expect of this?
First off, I think there is the political will. The issue has honestly caught almost all the politicians. If I have a barometer to gauge the feelings of political players in Abuja, I think it has really caught them unawares. They never expected the force with which the End SARS movement has manifested itself. It's now a movement that is alive. So the political will is there. The president has spoken. He's given a directive. In fact, his handlers have gone back to realize that there is an existing, presidential committee on police reform or SARS reform, as it were, that was set back as far back as 2017. And they met yesterday with an expanded membership, including civil society organizations. And I've looked at the civil society organizations involved. They are well respected. CISLAC, P1,
the Human Rights Organization
Sport Foundation, Clean Foundation, all respected civil society organizations, as well as from the Office of the Vice President, think tanks who are known for their knowledge and experience in policing. Now, that means the Inspector General of Police has at his disposal a think tank with which he can call upon to assist him in developing this structure, this management profile for this new unit. Because for me, I want to emphasize this point. The success or otherwise of this new unit will be determined by how it's managed. We've agreed that there is nothing in the name, it's just a name. Now, how is he going to manage that? That's what I hope he would look into this think tank at his disposal. He was at that meeting yesterday. Fall back on those think tanks, request for support from them. I am sure they will be able to help him in terms of developing a befitting operational order for this new SWAT. More importantly, and I think this is what the president's handlers also need to speak more about, President Buhari's government has come up with at least two very important platforms that can support the general police reform that every Nigerian wants. I'll quickly mention them. The Police Act 2020 that was passed in September 2020 is one veritable platform. It contains various elements that we as Nigerians want. How are they going to translate that act into operational orders for the police? That's the next thing I hope to see that the police leadership would do. The second thing is the police trust fund that is meant to take care of issues around allowances, around salary, training, equipment deficit within the police. So those two are veritable platforms that the Inspector General of Police can use to develop, a befitting police for a democratic, government like what we have in Nigeria at the moment. Anything short of that, unfortunately, we're going to look back and say we missed out on an opportunity.
Oh yeah, KABIRU, let me stay with you. The Presidential Panel on Police Reforms has agreed to the 5 points demand of the protesters. And the governor of Lagos State as well is setting up a 200 million fund to assist victims of police brutality. Now, what's your view on implementation? And what's the optimal, effective, efficient, and result-oriented way to go about it?
In simple terms, the meeting yesterday decided it was the National Human Rights Commission was, I think, the co-chair of that committee. And they set up an investigation panel. And what I made to understand is that panel would receive memoranda and, input from different segments of society. So a catalog of victims of police brutality, especially the now disbanded Special Anti-Robbery Squad, would be available. Unfortunately, they've not told us the timeline of that. So in terms of expectation, I hope the National Human Rights Commission will come out with a statement telling us the timeline for their work, so that Nigerians would be able to expect, okay, at the end of October or at the end of November, that catalog will be available. And then, of course, using that catalog, the Parliament yesterday at its sitting also promised Nigerians that there will be budgetary provision for compensation for victims of police brutality, as it were. So the whole of government, the executive arm and the legislative arm, seem to be working in tandem, not to leave the judicial arm of government. It's also part of the police reform, the Presidential Committee on Police Reform. So the entire 3 arms of government seem to be working in tandem in this. What I expect is a timeline of implementation, a framework that would allow us to know, okay, National Human Rights Commission, this is the timeline that we expect A to be released, the list of those that were victims, verified victims, the compensation, agreed compensation. I don't know what formula they're going to use, but perhaps using lawyers and other competent persons can come out and support us with what the level of compensation is. As an example, someone who loses his life, how are you going to compensate the family of the deceased? If it's an injury, if it's loss of property, what value are you going to place on that? So there are questions, and those are the kind of things I expect in the next few days, in the next few weeks. But a momentum has been built, and for us to manage this monster that has been created, and I use this monster now positively, that has been created out of the SARS movement, proactiveness, engagement is what I hope to see, and the tool is with the National Human Rights Commission. They are one agency, I would say, of government that Nigerians have a semblance of confidence in. So this is an opportunity for them to show that confidence reposed on them can be earned. And so I hope going forward, I will see that timeline, that framework of implementation.
Thanks, Mr. Adamu. Let's bring it back into our Lagos studios for just a moment. And if you are just tuning into Newsday as well, the live footage that we have on the screen, of course, is from the Lekki toll protest going on today for the NSARS protest. Mr. Adamu just spoke about a timeline, framework and plan. It's not enough, like we were saying earlier, to just say that you're going to come out and give in to the demands by the protesters, the Presidential Panel on Police Reforms. There has to be a timeline, a framework and a plan that the people can see, because this awakening that we're talking about means that people are not just going to sit down and have trust in the fact that you're going to enact that change. Until we can see that in action, we're not going to take words anymore. Mr. Efeni, what's your take?
Yes, when the president first spoke, I was talking about concrete steps.
Yes.
Concrete steps, not just words. Mm-hmm. Oh, accept this or accept that. There has to be concrete steps. Yeah. And for the government, like KABIRU Adamu mentioned, the political elites seem to have been caught unawares by this movement. So they also need to think fast and act fast. Because as it stands, it's like not much strategic thinking is going on. They brought 5 points, you accept 5 points. One would have expected that by the time 5 points was being delivered by Babatunde Fashion, by someone who the governor of Lagos State, to the president, the presidency should have even 10 points. To say beyond your 5 points, we have 10 points.
Thank you.
But to just be waiting to react to what is coming from the streets, I don't think enough strategic thinking
No
is going on
proactiveness,
there.
just reactiveness.
There has to be proactiveness. Now, this is real. Many thought that by yesterday, the acceptance of the 5 points will end this street protest. The heavy downpour will discourage people. But what you have seen is that the rainfall has even brought another kind of impetus, because raincoats coming from everywhere tells you that people are ready to go the whole hog on this matter. So the point I'm making is that quickly, time is of the essence for the government to start putting action plan in place. What is to be, if you are recruiting people to go and train, which action should be coming up fast and thick to douse the tension on the streets, not just to be, say, points accepted, change name. They are not far-reaching. There has to be concrete steps on the ground as we go along the way. And this is where proactive is the word from the side of the government.
All right, KABIRU, let me get back to you. You mentioned this in passing, actually, and one can't help but think, what do you make of the constant monitoring of this team, retraining, relearning, as it were, to make sure that this time around they don't deviate from the core mandate? Because I think what the issue here was that in as much as they seem to have been doing the work of caging the armed robbers, along the line, they deviated from their original mandate. So what do you make of constant monitoring, to make sure they are kept in line? Because, of course, when you let human beings, you don't monitor them, there could be a challenge there.
I cannot overemphasize that point. Unfortunately, however, I hate to, disappoint you, if I use that word loosely. That is a challenge of the entire national security architecture, the absence of monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to give us, the ability to ensure all the security agencies, depending on what you use, 21 or 27 of them, are in line with our national interest. So it's not peculiar with the police, unfortunately, but this is an opportunity for the government, as it were, to look into that gray area and ensure monitoring and evaluation mechanisms are introduced in our security architecture. For the police, there is already an opportunity. The Police Service Commission, the newly passed act, gives the Police Service Commission an element of supervision and monitoring and evaluation within the Nigerian police force. So the next thing to do is, how do you operationalize that? So I am hoping that at the level of either the National Security Advisor or one of the consuls, security consuls that exist, the two bodies, that the Inspector General of Police and the Minister of Police Affairs, as well as the Police Service Commission, will come together and come up with an M&E, a monitoring and evaluation framework that would look at all the functions of the police, not just their tactical units. Because let's remember, the disbanded SAS and even the newly created SWAT are not the only tactical units in the police. There are several other tactical units. And perhaps one of my misgivings as a security operator in Nigeria is the fact that most Nigerians generalized SAS. As far as they are concerned, anyone they see in plain clothes on the road doing the kind of things that we all hated is a SAS operative. But I know in reality that they were not all SAS operatives. So a monitor and evaluation mechanism that would make these roles stick to their operational orders. But before then, what is even more important is to make that operational order transparent, so that you as a journalist and I as a Nigerian know when there is a deviation. Right now, frankly, none of us knows whether what SARS did was a deviation from their mandate. We're just assuming, because that mandate was never made public. So I'm hoping that in line with our democratic dispensation, the police leadership would make visible and transparent the operational order of the newly created SWAT. That for us would be the template upon which we can judge the functions of SWAT. Anytime there's a deviation, I know that there is a deviation. But if we leave it blank, as it were, then we're just making assumptions that it's a deviation. Time will not allow me to go into it, but there are aspects of our regulation that unfortunately allowed the use of force. One of them, which was reviewed in October 2019, was the Force Order 237, which unfortunately allowed the use of force but did not delineate how that force can be used. How about the principle of necessity and the principle of proportionality? Where in the Force Order do we have contents like that? So I'm hoping that going forward, as part of the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that we're hoping will be introduced, the issues around the use of force, proportionality, necessity would be introduced.
Thank you very much, Mr. KABIRU ADAMU, a security analyst, for joining us on Newsday. This has been a great insight to have, and a lot of course, questions that have now been answered. So many thanks to you.